Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today we're looking at a Jeep that most people think they remember, but almost nobody actually understands. When people talk about classic Jeeps, the conversation almost always goes in familiar directions. They think of the CJ7, short, boxy, open to the elements. Or they jump ahead to the Wrangler, the model that would later carry Jeep into the modern era. But sitting quietly in between those two is a vehicle that rarely gets the attention it deserves. A Jeep that was unusual, misunderstood, and surprisingly forward-thinking for its time. That vehicle is the Jeep CJ8 Scrambler. The Scrambler came along in the early 1980s, and from the moment it appeared, it didn't quite fit into any neat category. It wasn't a traditional CJ, and it wasn't a conventional pickup either. Instead, it was Jeep experimenting, stretching the boundaries of what a CJ could be, both literally and philosophically. The Scrambler existed only from 1981 through 1986, and it never sold particularly well. In most years, production struggled to reach 10,000 units. That limited production run is one of the main reasons the Scrambler has faded from popular memory. Another ray. But here's the key thing many people miss. The Scrambler was not a unibody pickup like the Comanche. This was still very much an OL. To really understand why the Scrambler existed, you have to ironically, Jeep was both AMC's greatest asset and one of the reasons the company struggled. When AMC acquired Jeep back in 1970, it took on significant debt to do so. That debt weighed heavily on the company for years, limiting its ability to invest in new products and forcing it to be extraordinarily creative with the resources it had. AMC had built its reputation as a small car specialist, but once it tried to compete directly with the Big Three across multiple segments, its limited capital was stretched thin. Even AMC's advertising acknowledged this reality, openly asking consumers what they would do if they had to compete with the Big Three. It was a bold message, but bold messaging couldn't overcome financial reality. By the early 1980s, AMC was struggling enough that it entered into a partnership with Renault. On paper, the deal made sense. Renault would provide modern, fuel-efficient vehicles suited to the times. Some of those cars even earned awards and early praise. Unfortunately, reliability issues quickly damaged their reputation, and the partnership failed to stabilize AMC in the long run. Yet it was during this exact period of financial pressure that AMC's engineers and product planners became remarkably inventive. One of their most notable successes was the AMC Eagle, introduced in 1980. By combining a raised ride height with four-wheel drive on a car-based platform, AMC effectively created one of the earliest crossover vehicles, long before the term became mainstream. And they did it with minimal investment by adapting existing hardware. That same mindset gave birth to the Jeep Scrambler. Rather than developing an entirely new pickup from scratch, AMC simply stretched what it already had. The CJ platform was extended to roughly 103.5 inches of wheelbase, about 10 inches longer than the CJ7, which itself was already significantly longer than the earlier CJ5. That extra length made all the difference, allowing Jeep to add a small pickup bed behind the passenger compartment. In absolute terms, 103 inches is not a large wheelbase at all. In fact, the overall footprint of a Scrambler is surprisingly close to that of a modern Honda Civic. But the added length improved stability and created enough space for cargo, all while preserving the proportions and character that defined a CJ. From a manufacturing standpoint, the Scrambler was a masterclass in cost efficiency. Jeep reused nearly everything it could. The front doors, hood, windshield, suspension, engines, and transmissions were all shared with existing CJ models. The cab was simply terminated behind the front seats, topped with a roof, reinforced with a roll bar, and followed by a pickup bed. With minimal new tooling, AMC created an entirely new vehicle. Visually, the Scrambler was unmistakably a Jeep. Up front, it wore the familiar round headlights and the iconic 7-slot grille, a design element dating back to the earliest Willys Jeeps. That grille became so closely associated with Jeep that decades later the company would defend it legally, even taking General Motors to court over Hummer's similar design. Jeep ultimately lost that case, but it's telling that later Hummer designs quietly moved away from the 7-slot look. There are subtle design details that reveal AMC's priorities. The glass is flat everywhere. There's no curved side glass at all, a deliberate cost-saving measure that also reinforces the utilitarian nature of the vehicle. The door handles are another interesting quirk. AMC used larger, more rugged exterior handles on CJ-based vehicles, seemingly designed to be operated with a full hand rather than fingertips. It's a small detail, but it reinforces the idea that this was a tool, not a luxury item. The pickup bed itself was functional, though compromised. The roll cage consumed a significant portion of the space, and the wheel wells intruded noticeably. You weren't hauling lumber or construction materials, but you could easily carry camping gear, tools, or outdoor equipment. More importantly, the Scrambler looked good doing it. It projected an image of freedom, capability, and individuality that few vehicles of its era could match. Inside, expectations had to be realistic. Sound deadening was minimal, but that was true of most Jeeps at the time. The seats were reasonably comfortable, with simple but effective bucket designs. The dashboard was extremely basic, featuring only essential gauges. In fact, the dash was so simple that Jeep had to add a separate padded crash panel above the instruments, rather than integrating everything into a single molded structure. Air conditioning, when equipped, often looked like an afterthought. Many Scramblers used bolt-on AC systems that appeared separate from the rest of the HVAC components. This wasn't poor engineering so much as practical necessity. AMC built vehicles modularly because it had to, not because it wanted to. The interior also highlighted AMC's talent for parts reuse. Window cranks, switches, and trim pieces appeared across multiple AMC models. Even the embossed Jeep logo on the passenger side added a small sense of identity to an otherwise Spartan environment. Under the hood, most Scramblers relied on AMC's well-known 258 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder engine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was durable, torquey, and dependable. Over time, many owners replaced the original carburetors due to clogging issues, often swapping in motorcraft units that improved reliability and drivability. AMC engines were generally excellent, but the company rarely built its own automatic transmissions. Instead, it sourced proven units, most commonly Chrysler TorqueFlite automatics. Given AMC's scale, this was a smart decision, ensuring durability without unnecessary development costs. Underneath, you'll find components sourced from across the industry. GM steering pumps, Delco alternators, and motorcraft wiring all found their way into AMC vehicles. In many ways, American Motors truly was a blend of the American auto industry, pulling components from wherever it made the most sense. When you step back and look at the Jeep Scrambler as a whole, it represents ingenuity under pressure. AMC didn't have the resources to take big risks, but it still managed to create something distinctive by rethinking what it already had. The Scrambler wasn't a sales success, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was quietly innovative. Today, surviving Scramblers are increasingly appreciated for what they represent. They're rugged, simple, and unmistakably Jeep, with a silhouette that stands apart from anything that came before or after. In many ways, the Scrambler feels like a bridge between Jeep's military roots and its later lifestyle-focused vehicles. So what do you think? Was the Jeep Scrambler a clever solution from a company doing the best it could with limited resources? Or was it simply a niche idea that arrived at the wrong moment in history? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.